Welcome to 7 Steps to Presentation Success for Busy Execs. That sounds like a lot of words. Just bear with me. We've just finished a workshop and a couple of our people couldn't join us. So we've decided to make a recording so that even if you couldn't watch our live workshop, you can still get some of the information. And this is it. My name is Christel Fenter. And for those of you who do not know me, I am a brand building coach and a presentation coach with the main aim of what I do is I find and write your story. And then we look at how to present it as effectively as possible so that your target market can understand you and obviously see the need of using your services. Everything we do is structured around your story and how best to present it. And for now, we are working on a presentation format, specifically in PowerPoint. I don't know how many of you know 35 more slides and Harvard graphics, and I might be giving my age away, but that's since when I was involved in, or am involved in presentations. Pretty much, to be exact, 1993, I started as a presentations coach and has actually never stopped. Just added a couple of things in between, but that is how long I've been involved in presentations. Just some housekeeping quickly. The standard presentation is around 45 minutes. We might be a bit faster, seeing that we don't have any questions in between. Normally we do interactive videos where we ask you to keep your video on. We love participation, which is not going to happen today, and questions, but please send us your questions afterwards. I'll send you a link, an email address right at the end so that you can please forward me your questions. I would love to answer them and chat some more to you. Before we begin, we'd like to do an exercise which is normally reserved for coaching situation, which we call clearing the space. And it's basically just giving ourselves permission, everything that is distracting us, everything, all our frustrations and mind blocks and everything that's happening around us, because we're not working in a bubble, to give ourselves permission to put that aside, just for the sake of this presentation, so that we don't have those internal chatters that's taking our focus away. So otherwise we can just go to the pub or have a cup of coffee and not be here. We want to be in a reflective space. We want to be in a productive session today. So let's clear the space. And here we're back with 7 steps for presentation success. In case you haven't heard it yet, this is what we're talking about today. So in the 30 years that I've been involved in presentations, I've come across many, many interesting characters. I've seen the scare shit people that listen attentively to everything that I say and all the exercises that I give them. They go and do diligently because they are so petrified of presentations, and they do the exercises and practice sessions, etc., etc. But then we get the very confident guys, the probably overconfident, arrogant guys. Okay, some are girls, but let's not go into that topic. And I'd like to call this person on the screen Arrogant Andy. That one that thinks he knows it all, but doesn't want to listen. He's done so many presentations, you cannot tell him anything. And the crux of the matter is confidence is good, but overconfidence always sinks the ship. That's not me that said it. That's Oscar Wilde. So I think that's something to listen to, don't you? So our goal in 7 steps is to look at how we can improve your Beaks. Ever heard of the word Beaks or the acronym Beaks? Probably not. But it comes from a study that's been done through Dr. Ilana Su, who also wrote the book Competence Refined. And in the book, she describes the components that makes up our confidence, and not just confidence, but our competence. And it's not just about the skills that we have. It's not just about the knowledge that we have or the ability or even the experience that we have with all these components, but also our behavior, our willingness to learn, to adapt, and to overcome. But yeah, if you're interested, let me know and I can get you a copy of Competence Refined. Really a good book to read. But in essence, what I'm trying to get through to you is that there's always room for improvement. Yes, I know you've done presentations for many, many years and you are such a brilliant presenter, but there's always room for improvement. And just what we're going to say today, you've probably heard before, but maybe you just need to listen and hear it one more time. Maybe there's a little nugget or two that you can take away. Maybe there's a lot. Who knows? But if you don't keep an open mind, you might lose out. Okay, so very simple. 7 steps for presentation success process starts with the preparation phase. Then we are going to look at the why we're doing it and who we are doing it to. How we're going to do our content, our visual aids. Yes, we are going to practice, or we're going to tell you about practicing. How we do our delivery, as well as the handouts, the what to do, the what not to do, etc., etc. And yes, our time is limited, so we're just going to skim over the basics today, and hopefully that's enough to get you interested. But yeah, if you can just remember, visualize this picture. I believe that if you can see everything in pictures, as simple as possible, it's so much easier to understand it. A lot of the times we hear the words, we have to do presentations, and we freak out. But if you can just take it step for step, for step, for step, it's not as bad. Or if you consider improving on your existing skills, it still helps to visualize the steps and where you can improve a little bit more. Maybe you can give yourself a point out of 10 on each of these steps or processes and see where can you improve a little bit more, one nudge at a time. So I would like to meet a person that doesn't have limited time. We all have limited time, or at least if we're still in a working phase of our lives, we all have limited time. And yes, I think we are supposed to be very lucky if we do have limited time, because it's only the people that's already in retirement that doesn't have anything to do, that's got abundance of time. But for the rest, we all have limited time. And yes, a lot of people would skip the preparation phase because we don't have time. But I do believe it is quite important. And here's the 5 P's of preparation, why it is important. Quite simply, proper preparation prevents poor performance. It's as simple as that. If you do the prep work, the rest just falls into place. And there's 3 specific areas that I want to quickly touch on. The first one is your ego and the influence that your ego has got on your presentation. The physiological side. Yes, it's not a spelling error. It's not a psychological effect that your presentation will have on you and your audience. Yes, that psychologically, there's a lot of damage that can be done. But we're going to look today at the physiological side. And then the time required for a proper presentation. So who knows someone like this guy, the Mr. Know-it-all that has got an ego higher than the Empire State Building? You cannot tell him anything. He knows everything about everything, etc., etc., etc. Jen Shirkani has written a book, Ego versus EQ, and it's based on research that's been done through the State Council of New Hampshire. And basically it highlights the 8 ego pitfalls in business, but I think it's very applicable to the presentation side. One of the findings that they got from this research is that 2 out of 5 CEOs will fail within the first 18 months, mostly because they don't listen to feedback. They're blind for their blind spots. And I think if you can be cognizant of, maybe I need to listen. Maybe there is a spot or two where I can improve and stop irritating everyone else, you might do better. Who knows? Some other ego traps, and we've already spoken about it. Overconfidence. Confidence is good, but overconfidence, never a good idea. Being in love with your topic. Have you ever been in a presentation where people can just go on and on and on and on in a tangent about the subject that you think, oh my word, this is so boring, and he's in love with his topic. Not good. No attempt to improve communication style. And yes, some people are really good. But again, there's always room for improvement. Death by PowerPoint. We hear that so often. People say PowerPoint is dead, it's just boring, etc., etc. My comment on it is that it's not PowerPoint's fault. It's a person behind the screen that's working the PowerPoint presentation. It's a person presenting the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to talk about it in this presentation, how you can fix these things. But I think most of all, it is important to know that it's not about you. You are here to serve the people that you're talking to. I am trying to help you to do better presentations, or at least find a nugget or two where you can improve on. So it's not about me. It's not about how smart I am and all my many, many years of experience. It's about you and how I can help you. And the moment also that you take the focus away from yourself, it's almost as if your stress levels dies down. Because I'm not here for me. I'm here for you. I hope I'm selling you on that point. Okay, so on the physiological side, what are the impacts? Distractions. We all know them. And they can put you into a flight or fight situation. Fight or flight, whatever way you want to describe it. We all know that situation where your brain just freezes up and you think it's just you. But the clever people actually has done a lot of research about this, and they call it the amygdala hijack, where your brain literally freezes. Your prefrontal cortex cuts off and just cannot think. And there's many phases where you can experience this in presentations. For those people that are very scared of presentations and talking in front of people, it could be right at the start of a presentation. They just go completely numb. They cannot think, etc., etc. I'm sure one or two of you have experienced that before. I have, definitely. But then there's also distractions that come in the middle of your presentation and just put you off completely and your brain freezes up. Poof. So, and there's many exercises and things that we can do to not necessarily prevent the fight or flight situation or the amygdala hijack, but to keep it under control. Or if it does happen, how to calm yourself and how to get out of that. And that is things that we typically talk about in our extended workshops that we do. Obviously, we're not going to go into detail today. But yeah, we've got internal distractions. That's chatter going on in your head, not just in my head as a presenter, but also in the heads of my audience. It keeps on chattering. And it does help to do that exercise in the beginning, clearing the space, where we put our distractions or try and put it aside. We also have technical distractions. I had a situation this morning. I'm working on a brand new computer. And for some unearthly reason, my presentation cut off when I tried to present or did a dummy run. I was like, poof. almost couldn't think. You're so stressed. It's an hour before you have to start your workshop, your live workshop, and the things are just not working the way it's supposed to be working. Load shedding, very typical. And it's not just that we don't have power, or if we have a backup system, all of a sudden you're in a live presentation and your internet link is not working properly or not as it should be, thanks to load shedding. All technical distractions, and you definitely don't need them, and you need to know what to do if that happens. And then we have audience distractions. That irritating guy right in the front that is chewing his chewing gum and he is not focusing on your presentation, and you can see he is bored as shit, and you've got no idea how to handle it. Well, that's what we do in our workshops. We help you to get over that. One of my pet hates is where people do presentations with light backgrounds or white backgrounds. And the sad part is when you Google presentation templates, you very, very often get templates which is done by or are done by professional companies, or they call themselves professional, but all the templates have got white backgrounds and dark elements on it. And why should it matter? How does this look on your eyes? Normally, we are so used to people presenting on a white background that we don't realize that there's major strain on our eyes. It's only when we come from a darkish background to a white background that we realize, whoa, this is really distracting. And in essence, it's a physiological problem because the intense light lets the iris contract. And subconsciously, it's a distraction to you because you're starting to brew this headache that is happening, and it takes away your focus from the person that's busy presenting. And you definitely don't want that. If you can avoid it, avoid it. Why would you run into a situation if you know there's danger, if you could have avoided it? It's as simple as that. And it's a case of, we know Murphy's going to show up in our presentation, but if you can control certain parts, why not control it? So try it. Another distraction physiologically is having a complete information overload. Your brain just goes into overdrive, and in essence, it cannot focus. And yes, I know this example that I've used is probably you're not going to see something as bad as this. But a lot of the time, a lot of our presentations have got so many elements, there's no focus point, that you cannot focus on the presentation. You get distracted and you lose interest, and you start to look at your watch, you start to look at your cell phone, you even start to look at how the building has been built, etc., etc., etc. So if you can control it, control it. And that brings us to time. Winston Churchill very famously said, if you want me to speak for 2 minutes, it will take me 3 weeks of preparation. If you want me to speak for an hour, I am ready now. Sounds familiar? How many presentations and talks have you been in where people just ramble on and on and on and on? And apart from not always making sense, not having a proper structure, a lot of the time you tend to say things which you were not supposed to say because you just haven't spent the time planning. So do yourself a favor, do your audience a favor, and put in the preparation time and get it right, hopefully. So that brings us to the why we are doing the presentation and who are we doing it for. Well, first of all, it is very important to sit and think. Why is this important? Why should we worry? In most cases, we have an opportunity to convince people to buy our product, to buy our service, or to convince them that I know something and they should be buying from me in the future. We're obviously not just here to kill time. There's lots of other things to kill the time with. And yes, if we do have the opportunity to make a difference, to make an impact, why not use it? If we have an opportunity to be the star and get all the rewards, why not use it? And most of the times we only have one opportunity, then it's gone. You might be sitting here and thinking, wow, that sounds like something that I want to continue listening to. Or you could think, no, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And you will probably never, ever listen to what I have to say, ever. So I have one opportunity, and you will have probably only one opportunity to impress people and to convince you to think the way that you are thinking. Well-formed outcomes. A lot of the times we don't spend enough time to figure out exactly what we want from our presentation. What is the goal? Why are we doing it? We're not just here, as I said, to kill time. Really, there's loads and loads of other things to kill time with, or to impress our boss, or do what our boss has said. Make the time to get your goals properly sorted out. If I'm going to run a marathon, say, Sani Stagger in November, I have a time now because I know I'm going to run on this day in November. It is going to be a distance of 42 kilometers, 21 up, 21 down. I can start planning properly. And the same with your presentation. The more detail you have on your well-formed outcomes, not just goals, well-formed outcomes. And that's a discussion for completely other day of how to do your well-formed outcomes. But the more you focus on that, and very similar to your SMART goals, having it specific, measurable, attainable, having a time frame, etc., etc., etc. The more you can do that, the more you can plan your presentation and your content and your call to actions and everything that goes with it. So who are we talking to? Who's our target market or target audience? Whether it's target market or target audience, pretty much the same thing. We talk about things like the demographics, geographics, very importantly, the psychographics. But even if we go back and talk about demographics, the age of our audience, the position, typical position of the people that we are talking to, I'm talking about position in a company, CEO, secretaries, it does make a difference. Who are we talking to? How are we going to present ourselves? The language that we're going to use, the time that we're going to do to present it, etc., etc. So know your demographics. Geographics, typically, if I'm speaking to a bunch of South Africans, they would probably know what load shedding is all about. And if I crack a joke about load shedding, they would sort of get it. Although I'm not quite sure who still wants to crack jokes about load shedding. But then again, if you're in Europe and you're starting with load shedding, it's a whole new ballgame. But all in all, you need to know where they come from, because it does also have an impact on how you talk, what you say, how you say it, etc. Psychographics to me is, when it comes to target market analysis, the most important thing. What's the needs of your audience? What's the pains of your audience? What's their habits that you want to address? The more you know that, the more you can bring in material that's going to help them to understand your message and retain the information that you're giving them and act upon it, etc., etc. I can go ad infinitum on this. But the bottom line is, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, it's not about you. You are only serving your target audience. So know who you are talking to. It does make a huge difference. Believe me. I don't know who of you have heard of the term NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. It's typically a subject topic that's reserved for psychologists, coaches, etc. And on this topic of NLP and neuro-linguistic programming, we can also go on for another week, which I definitely don't want to do. But I think from a presentation point of view, The big nugget that we can take from this is people like people who are like themselves. And yes, I don't say be like somebody else and lose your authenticity, but at least try for the beginning of your presentation to come back either up or down, depending on where you are on the scale, to their level, how they talk. I think a typical example is if I present to a bunch of students, I'm not going to pitch up fully suited. I am not going to use, well, I want to say I'm not going to use my high and mighty language, but maybe they are on that level where they want to listen to very high and mighty language and definitions and very theory. Or at least in the beginning, and then you can go back into settle into your authentic space. But it is important to be cognizant of what's their language, and not just the spoken language, the verbal, the non-verbal, and everything in between. And yes, that's a whole topic on its own, but be cognizant of it. People like people who like themselves. It's a fact. You can't deny it. So that brings us to our content. And I think if the only thing you remember about content is this burger, I would be satisfied. And yes, it is around about lunchtime now, so this burger is making me a little bit hungry, but let's go over that. The point I'm trying to make with this burger is when you work your content, remember that there's 3 sections. You've got your burger bun at the top, you've got your patty and all the frills in the middle, the content, and then you've got your end of your presentation, your bottom burger bun. And it's extremely important. We talk about the tell, and tell principle. Tell your audience what you are going to tell them. Then tell them that what you have come out to tell them, the content, the big piece, meat. And then at the end, tell them what you have just told you. Tell them what you have just told them. Hope you got that. So tell, and tell. And with that, also remember to always keep it simple. Yes, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it super simple. There's many different varieties of explaining kiss, and no, it's not the kissy that the children do. This is the kiss for the presentation. Then tell, and tell. As with a burger, tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you came out to tell them, and then tell them what you have just told them. It's a way we learn as adults, as youngsters. We need to get first a glimpse of what is going to be talked about. Just a quick outline. If you can remember, if we go back on our presentation, I gave you a graphical or sort of graphical explanation of all the 7 steps very quickly, just so that you can, in your mind, get an idea of what we're going to talk about. And then we get into the detail. And then at the end, just now, we are going to just quickly go back and remind you of what we have spoken about. So tell, and tell. And then again, if we go back to knowing your audience, who you're talking to, the better you know them, the more you can structure your content in such a way that it fits them perfectly and sells your message on its own. And that essentially is marketing, because all of this is part of marketing. Knowing your client so well that your message fits them perfectly and sells itself. Visual aids. A lot of people think of presentations as just visual aids, but it's not just visual aids. What's the purpose of visual aids? Number 1, to simplify the concepts. If I stood in front of you and just rambled on, and I could have been an amazing presenter that you hang on my lips when I talk, but The visual aids is there to help you remember what we have spoken about. Just think about the picture of a burger. It's there to help you visualize what content's all about. And yes, if I had a lot of content in there, you probably wouldn't even remember anything. But make it simple so that you can simplify the concept as much as possible. It's there for you to retain information. It's not a crux for me to, if I haven't prepared properly, to read off everything off a screen. That's where your Deaf by PowerPoint comes in. Please, no, never, ever. And it's there to support your action, your call to action. Every presentation should have a call to action. If it doesn't have a call to action, however simple, you're pretty much losing the point. Because you're not here to kill time. You're here to reach a goal, to get to an action. And another very important thing about visual aids is it helps to improve your perception as the audience, to see that I've done my work, I have prepared. So I have not just come here and throw a couple of slides together and it's all hogwash and not in order. But the more I prepare, the more prepared I look, the more or the bigger the propensity is that you might think that I know what I'm talking about. Hope you got that one. Okay, things that you should never do. It's not about the skills. It's not showing off how amazingly well you know PowerPoint or any other presentation slides, program or app or whatever. It's not about your skills. It's not to show how cool you are. It's not to show how many fonts you have. Please, no. And in our workshops, we talk about which fonts to use and which not, and what to avoid ad infinitum. There is such a big pitfall when it comes to fonts. And again, it's not about you. If I can say this over and over again, I will, because it's so important to understand. It's not about you. It's so that the other person can understand, can remember, can retain, can act, etc., etc., etc. We've spoken about the dark background of the light elements. Remember that. It is so important. You can lose your entire audience if you get this wrong. And obviously, if they are clever enough, there are still people around that think it is okay to have a bright white background. No, it's not. There's still people that think it's okay to get the whole bunch of elements on a slide, especially if you're in the engineering field. You like to put lots of graphs and everything together on one slide. No, it's not going to work. Keep it simple, stupid. 6 elements per slide. Full sentences? No, no, definitely not. Again, that's where the Deaf by PowerPoint comes in. Make your words that you use as short as possible. It needs to be as visual as possible. Unless, of course, you do have a very important quote that you do want to focus on. Winston Churchill's quote that I used earlier on is probably a good example of that. And yes, it is still a bit debatable whether I really needed to have an entire quote, but I have decided to do that. And at least it's not every single slide where I have the entire sentence on the slide. Standard elements should be kept consistent. Typically, your heading as well as your logo at the bottom. Yes, it's important to have your logo at the bottom because it's part of the whole branding. Subconsciously, you think of these slides and all these wonderful things you're hearing, and right at the end, you keep on seeing adventure business coaching content. But it's subconsciously, it's not irritating you. And because that logo has been there on exactly the same spot, it's not going to take your attention away from what I'm saying. Because most of the titles are more or less on the same side, same place, It's not distracting. And yes, a lot of these distractions happen subconsciously. You don't even think about it. But the more things you can control, the better. And yes, times have changed. We are used to all sorts of weird and wonderful things, but our brains still operate exactly the same way. If there's too many distractions, we're not going to focus. And if you can't focus on what I'm saying, I might as well just go and sit in the pub and have a drink because I'm wasting my time there. I need you to focus, and having the standard elements on your slide consistently at the same place does make a big difference. Yes, you may think it's a little bit boring, but go and check it out. It does make a difference. Left to right. Well, that's if you're in the Western world, we read from top left to bottom right. So our titles ideally should be top left, and our eyes automatically follow the screen from left to right to the bottom, and then we go back to the left-hand side. And that's just something that happens physiologically without us even thinking about it. So again, this might sound really stupid to you, but from a physiological side, it does make an impact. And the more you keep to these rules, the less distractions there will be. And again, on this note, it's the same as when you're presenting. Why do we stand on the left-hand side of the screen? Because our eyes go from left to right, and then it automatically goes back to left. So if you want to keep people's attention on you, because that's where most of their attention should be, the ideal is to stand on the left-hand side. Yes, you want to move around, but your default spot should come back to left of the screen. But that's when you're in the Western world. Colors and animations. People get quite carried away with all sorts of weird and psychedelic things. Please refrain to just the basics. Again, if I had all sorts of weird and wonderful animations that weren't consistent, it would have distracted you. So stick to the basics. It does make a difference. Some quick slide tips. Save on the start of your presentation, even before you have even started putting your presentation together. I have lost so many presentations due to all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And it does help if you name your presentation, because immediately before you start, before you do your first design, because then you can just quickly go Control S, Control S, Control S. And yes, you do have that automatic function where you can say save every 5 minutes, every 1 minute, every 10 minutes, whatever. But I do find that if I've finished with something important, even if it's just one sentence, one element, I don't want to lose it. Just quickly, Control S. It works magic. Backups of backups. If you lost so many presentations and I have, you will understand. Make a backup of your backup. And especially if you go and present on somebody else's computer and you need to take your presentation on whatever electronic format, make sure there's a backup. Make sure you've got it on your little memory stick, maybe 2 memory sticks, because one might fail. You never know. Murphy is a wonderful person and very active. Send it to your phone. Send it to your friend or whoever is going to be at the presentation. Make sure you've got backups of backups. Your images, everything that you use should have a message to it. And that brings me to these wonderful people that's walking down the path. And yes, it looks like a great pic. But if I'm talking about we need to get our productivity up, if I talk about our economy that is going to die if we don't get our butts into gear, this picture is not going to do the trick. And yes, it might say, because of all these people just walking around randomly, that's probably why our economy is where it is. And yes, if you have a presentation where you talk to people about the wonderful idea of having walking meetings, this could have worked. But you need to look at your content and make sure whatever you use fits in with your message. And then watermarks. Please, people, I don't know if you can see this, but and maybe it's just because I have an absolute pet hate for people using images that has got watermarks on it. 99.9% of the people out there knows you have stolen the picture and you haven't paid for it. So please don't use watermarks. There is a zillion other photos. And yes, ideally you should use your own photos, which depicts authentic photos of yourself, of your company, of whatever. But yes, no watermark photos. That is like a complete no. Practice. Who practices their presentations before they have to go and deliver it? Probably not a lot. And yes, it comes back to how important is it to you to have an amazing presentation and get all the results that you want. But apart from practicing your presentation over and over again, it is important to consider deliberate practice. And this photo, incidentally, is of a running excursion that I went on in January to Mount Source with my coach, which is depicted in the picture here. But without my running coach, I can plan to do a big race like Sonestago or Skyrun or Adu next year. But I won't get the same results if I do it on my own, as opposed to having a coach that can work with me, that will make sure that I don't end up with injuries, etc., do the wrong things. And yeah, so deliberate practice, so absolutely important. Dr. Erik Erikson has done a lot of studies regarding the whole practice of being deliberate, planning every step of your practice. But yeah, just to get back to why we need to practice, that's in the practice sessions where we realize, sure, but what I thought was going to work is not working really. What I have written out, you can write your entire script that you're going to say. But a lot of the times when you start talking it out loud, not just in your head, you realize, it doesn't sound that great anymore. So practice. And that's, again, when you sign up for our workshops, we do a lot of practical practice because it is so absolutely important. And yes, the time we spend in doing our practice sessions all depends on how important is this presentation to you on a scale of 1 to 10. And that only you can decide. But if it's anything from a 6 to a 10, I really would suggest putting in the time, practicing it out loud in front of your mirror, record it on your Zoom or wherever, whatever material you have, technology you have to your position. Practice. The more you practice, the better you're going to get at it, the more confident you're going to be, and the more you're going to realize, I want to do this rather different, I want to change this slide, I want to change this word, etc. So, and again, I've spoken about it. Control what you can control. Murphy's going to come and visit you in your presentation, no matter what. That's a guaranteed. Something will go wrong. But control what you can control. And that brings us to the delivery, and that is a subject all on its own. And again, in our workshops and our practical sessions, we do look at where you should stand, especially if you're nervous and you don't have confidence to walk around and grab the attention of the entire room. Or if you do an online presentation, how would you, like I'm doing at the moment, how should you put Your camera, how should you position it? What should your background look like, etc., etc. So super important. And again, back to the in-person presentations. Why do you need to stand on the left-hand side? There's a whole psychology behind it. And we'd love to share that with you. The tone of your voice. Yes, it comes back to who are you talking to. If I'm speaking to a lot of soft-spoken people, I can't speak at my normal pace, at my normal volume. I need to turn it down. Otherwise, I'm going to irritate them intensely and they're not going to listen to a word. Or if I do listen, they're not going to act upon it because they're going to think the whole time, what an idiot. So, clarity of voice. Now, this is a nice subject to talk about. And there's many, many ways, many exercises. I was fortunate enough, and yes, if my mother listens to this, she might remind me that I did take drama classes many, many years ago. And what happened to all of that? I did get all the lessons. And yes, I try from time to time to remember what my mother has taught me. But I was fortunate enough to have a mother that was or still is a drama teacher, and to go through all the exercises of how to get your voice into action, how to, the same way that when we go and run, we need to warm up. You need to get your voice to warm up. And I was fortunate enough to have a dad that was absolutely brilliant with presentations and public speaking. And he did a course in around about the 1970s through Dale Carnegie. I don't know how many of you know Dale Carnegie. And one of the things that the Dale Carnegie course taught him was using these little pills, which nowadays they call it Vigroids. It used to be called Negroids, but Vigroids, but it says on the box for clarity of voice. And these things work. I've been using it throughout my school life. It's a long time ago. And I've also used it for all my children with all their speech competitions. And that was over many, many years. It is difficult to get hold of these things. If you do find them in the pharmacies, grab a couple of them, because a lot of the times you don't find them, but they work absolutely brilliant. And again, we tend to drink coffee while we talk, but try and stay away from coffee. Keep the water at hand. Don't drink your cold drinks, especially not fruit juices, etc., etc. There's a lot of tips and tricks and techniques that you can do to improve the clarity of your voice. So, mannerisms, oh my word. And I know I have a lot of them, so please excuse me. But yes, we need to talk with our hands, but if it's overdone, it can distract. If the way we use our hands when we present in an in-person presentation, the way we show to people what we're talking about, just something as simple as using an open hand, as opposed to those ugly, horrible laser pointers, makes a huge difference in how people see you as trustworthy, etc., etc. And again, this is a topic that we can go on and on and on about it. But again, if you practice and you record yourself, you see the mannerisms and the things that you can change, even if just 1% change every time you do a presentation. It's a small 1% changes that makes you brilliant in the end. Relax. Yes, I know I'm also tend to forget about to relax, but it's important to breathe and to give yourself time for the audience to think. And yes, we're in a situation here where you can't talk back to me right at the moment, pity. Where normally while somebody's busy asking a question, you have an opportunity to breathe, to drink a glass of water, just to calm down, to change the pace, to change the tone. Because the more relaxed you are, the more relaxed your audience will be. But whatever you do, be authentic. You've heard it over and over and over again. I think most of these things that we've spoken about, you have heard before. But it's important to remind yourself of all these points, but most of all, to be authentic. If you're not authentic, people are not going to believe you. People are not going to trust you. and they will most probably never listen to you. So hopefully I do come off as authentic. I hope so. I really do. You're welcome to give feedback and tell me what you think. And that brings us to handouts. And I'm going to be really, really quick on this. So why do we use handouts? Number one, to enhance our message, to achieve a goal. Remember, we set those goals, or we were supposed to set the goals as what we want from this presentation, what we want people to act upon, our call to action. And the handouts is supposed to enhance all of these, the message, the goal, and the actions that you're supposed to take going further. When should we give handouts? Whether it's like in this picture, a physical handout, or whether it's a link that people can go and read more information or sign up or whatever, we always do it at the end. Why? Because we're all human. If you give me something, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start paging through it. And while I page through it, I might see something that I don't like, and I haven't listened to your entire message yet. So I might judge you on something that I see in your handout, and you haven't explained yourself yet. And boom, you've lost me. You don't want that. Or I could just sit and page through it while you keep on talking. And I'm sorry, it's not possible to multitask. I cannot focus on you 100% if I'm busy reading. It is physically impossible. Even if you're Einstein, you cannot do it. You need me to focus on your presentation, look you in the eyes, and listen to every word that you say, and not for me to work through your handouts, whether a physical paper handout or a link or whatever. Give it out at the end. So giving out things at the end, here's the catch. So just very quickly, and no, it's definitely, I don't want to see it as a catch, but if you do feel the need that you need to spend more time on your presentation skills, on your content, on everything that we've spoken about, I do provide personal coaching, and I can help you write your presentations. The content, the whole concept development, everything from start to finish, and I most definitely can help you practice, either in person, or we also do group workshops where we do online workshops. It obviously makes it much more cost effective if it is in a group as opposed to one-on-one, but both options are available to you. And yes, we've got You've Got This 1 month workshop. We've essentially got 4 times 2 hours of more academical training, where we go through all the shoulds and shouldn'ts and everything, very similar to what we've done today, just in much, much, much more detail. We help you to learn how to plan, to construct, and to deliver your presentation, a powerful presentation, might I add. And then, very importantly, we take the time to do practical experiences, to do the pitch and presents over and over and over again until you are comfortable. And yes, the coaching option is still available. We do charge 2,500 Rand per person for this entire workshop, with the practical experiences that we give is not just 1 month, but it goes over until you are happy with your presentation techniques. But apart from this option, we also have something brand new, and that's what we call Founders Business Society, where it is going to launch in November, but I want you to start thinking about the whole idea. What we're going to do with Founders is it's a support network for our founders of companies, however small or large, the advantages. And one of them will be our You've Got This presentation workshop and pitch and present evenings. And the pitch and present evenings will go on and on and on for our members as long as they stay members. So hopefully you do see the value in that. And that is it. Let's quickly recap on what we've said. Confidence is good, but overconfidence always sinks the ship. It's not just me that said it, Oscar Wilde said it, but we all know that. Ego, such a problem. We need to get away from it. We need to be cognizant that it could be a major, major stumbling block in our presentations, in our communications in general. The physiological issues with a presentation that puts us into that flight or fight or flight, flight or fight, however you want to say it. It is a problem, and we need to sort out that horrible amygdala hijack or prefrontal cortex that's cutting off. No, we need to sort that out. Time. We need to spend enough time to make sure that we get all the rewards. And yes, just quickly again, the 7 steps presentation process. Preparation. Remember the 5 B's? The whys and the whos, our target market planning or target audience planning, and how important our presentation is. The content, remember the burger that we spoke about? The tell, and tell, keep it simple, stupid. Visual aids, oh my boy, we can go on and on and on about how you can fix all the errors that you've been making, or if you have been pretty good, all the little things that you can do to just improve one notch at a time. Practice, 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 and deliberate practice. Delivery, what you should do, where you should stand, and everything else to do with delivery of your presentation and your message. And then the handouts and the call to action and what you want your people to do. So I would have loved to take your questions right now, but please send it to me. My email address is christel@businessadventures.co.za. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got some value out of it, and I would love to talk to you. Keep well. Cheers.